Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen, here on my YouTube channel and Twitch channel with two very special guests. First of all, he is the creator of slashfilm.com. He's also the co-host of the Ordinary Adventures YouTube channel. Peter Soretta, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
And he is the co-host of the Streaming Things podcast. He's also the creator and editor-in-chief of the Movies Are Therapy TikTok channel. I'm just picking random media words. Chris Rudd, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, and I love that title. I'm going to tell my people.
Yeah. So today on this chat, I have been kind of using this program, Ecamm, to like do broadcasts. I'm like, oh, this is a pretty flexible program, and I could probably do like a weekly live show with this thing. So I'm kind of dipping my toe in, trying things out, and I'm really grateful to Peter and Chris for joining me today. We have a few items to discuss. First, we're going to start by talking about this big Mondo news that is hit today. Peter had some strong thoughts about that. Then we're going to segue into a conversation about what's going on over at TikTok. The CEO of TikTok took the stand in Congress this week, and the results were mixed. And then we are going to conclude by diving into John Wick Chapter 4. We will be very clear if and when we get to spoilers. So let's get into it, folks. Peter Soretta, last year we learned that Funko, the company that makes those little bobblehead doll type things, had acquired Mondo, which is a high-end pop culture collectible vendor from Alamo Drafthouse. This was in June of 2022. And I mean, I think one of the issues with what was going on here was Drafthouse had started refining their business model. Let's say, right? Like they had gotten into things like websites and posters and stuff like that, and they're like, hey, we need to do stuff that makes more money. So they're like, we got to offload some of these things. I think Birth Movie's Death shut down, right, or was sold, and they sold off Mondo as well. When you first heard that Funko would be buying Mondo, Peter Soretta, what did you think?
I thought it was a good fit because Funko as a company has so many licenses. They own the license for everything, right? Like they make, if you can think of a movie or TV character, even an obscure one, they probably make a Funko Pop of it. So I was like, oh, that's great for Mondo because, kind of being tied to the Alamo Drafthouse might have been, I don't know, might have not been the best thing for them, is what I thought. Like being tied to Funko, where you have, a company that's really good at getting all these licenses, should unlock the door to tons of screen printed posters, vinyl records,
Right.
games, toys, and stuff like that. So I was positive about it until today.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's best to belong to a company that actually has a business model that is aligned with your business model, right? Like, Funko sells things, Mondo sells things, Alamo Drafthouse sells tickets, and they run theaters and they sell food. So it made more sense. And it's like, hey, Funko seems to be really good at selling pop culture tie-in stuff, so surely this is a match made in heaven. Or so we thought until today when we learned that Funko is cutting back their Mondo movie poster business dramatically, laying off the co-founders and other staff. I'm reading here from Variety.com. They bought Mondo last year for $14 million. And
Wow.
we learned that Eric Garza has been laid off. We learned that co-founders of Mondo, Mitch Putnam and Rob Jones, have been laid off. And this has been perceived by a lot of people as basically decimating the Mondo business. So, Peter Soretta, I think it's worth it to talk about, like, how many pieces of Mondo artwork do you think you own?
Sadly, probably hundreds. I first came across Mondo in 2008. I went to South by Southwest Film Festival, and Alamo Drafthouse downtown used to have this little small room, or actually the South Lamar one had one too, a little small room where you could go in and they had all these Mondo posters and you could flip through them. And before then, the only way you got a movie poster is to buy one of those, movie posters in Target or whatever, like a theatrical poster. But there's a difference between a theatrical poster and what Mondo was doing, because theatrical posters are meant to sell the movie,
Mhm.
where Mondo was artfully created for someone who has already loved the movie
Right,
and might,
right.
like Dave, I know you're, a spoiler phobe. Uh, movie posters usually
Don't
hide some
have
of
don't
the,
have spoilers on them, yeah. But
I mean, some,
Mondo posters might have spoilers on them basically, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But also they could be very artfully done and like illustrate some of the twists and turns and whatever. I don't know.
Right.
I just fell in love with Mondo, and I think uh, one of the problems here is Mondo and their screen printed posters. Part of the appeal is that they are limited. Part of
Mhm.
the appeal that
Right.
people want to buy them is like they only make a few hundred of them, and it's almost like a collectible. It becomes a piece of paper they put on your wall becomes a collectible that can be sold on eBay for
Right.
thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't bring the most amount of money to limit to like a few hundred posters. I think what Mondo's been doing lately, and I think what we're gonna see them do potentially with new leadership, is probably a lot of timed editions, which means like selling something for, a 2 days or one day or a weekend or something like that. And that way, anybody that wants to get it can get in, but it'll still be limited in some sort. But anyways, the big thing here is Mondo makes a lot of money on vinyl records. They make a lot of money on vinyl records and toys, but not screen prints, from what I understand.
Mhm. Mhm.
Obviously I don't have the figures in
Right.
front of me.
Right,
They
right.
don't release that, but you can make as many vinyl records as you want. You
Right.
can't make as many of the screen prints. But
They're
my
not, like, limiting the vinyl records runs, right? Yeah.
yeah.
But well, let me ask Chris for a second. Chris Rudd from Movies Are Therapy and streaming things. Every time I see one of Chris's videos on TikTok, he always has tons of movie posters behind him, but very few Mondo posters I noticed, Chris. Mostly theatrical posters. Where do Mondo posters occupy in your kind of imagination? Like, are you like me, which is to say, you admire them from afar, but you don't necessarily have that many of them?
That's exactly right. I don't own any of them. I'd like to look at them. Sometimes they upload them to various movie logs, and I can use that artwork when I'm talking about the movie specifically. But I don't own any. So I guess the positive spin on this, even though it's a terrible, terrible thing, Peter, your collection's value has probably skyrocketed just now. So there's that.
Yeah, yeah, it is
uh
unfortunate, but yeah. Also, Hamstrung in the chat is saying the limited nature makes them unappealing to me. I wish companies would chill with that model. Usually, I miss out, and then they skyrocket in price in the aftermarket.
yeah.
That is a good point of about Mondo posters. Like, I would occasionally try to buy some, and they would go on sale, and then it's like 5 minutes later they're gone, and then you need to spend hundreds of dollars to get them on eBay afterwards. Um, Peter, what was your experience with this? I mean, it seems like you're usually the one that was the person that bought them, at the normal price.
Yeah, I mean, I bought them at the normal price, and so I've bought some on eBay for way more than what they originally sold for. But I had an argument.
What is the most you have ever spent on a
Oh
Mondo
no,
poster, Peter?
$1,000
Oh my
on a
god.
poster.
What
Yeah.
is the poster?
It's Matt Ferguson's Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like a Star Wars
Is that the one you
style.
sent me?
Like it's
I can put that up on the screen. Is that the one you sent me?
no,
Oh.
it wasn't actually a Mondo poster, so it's
Oh,
probably
okay.
doesn't this
Okay.
discussion. But it was very limited because they gave it to the cast and crew, and it was like a few extras,
Wow.
studio stuff. So anyways, besides that, I
Incredible.
the other co-founder of the company was this guy named Justin Ishmael, and they famously did this deal with Lucasfilm and Star Wars and Disney, where they made the series of Star Wars posters around the time before Force Awakens, and like some of those runs, like a Tyler Stout run, I think had almost 1,000 posters. But I saw like posting about this on Slash Film. I saw the outrage that fans had that they weren't able to get in. They weren't able to be one of those 1,000 people. And I remember having this conversation with Justin at the time, and I was like, "You got to do timed editions." And he was so against it because he thought like once you open the door of it not being limited, there'll be less interest in it. And I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I think the problem here for me is if you aren't going to prioritize the art and the artists, if the poster business, like, it seems like they got rid of most of the poster people. They say that they're still going to do posters, but I don't know what artists are going to want to work with them. They had like all these prior relationships and stuff like that. Um, but like all those other businesses, like the vinyls and the toys, is all like them taking the good posters and then putting it on a vinyl record. Do you know what I mean? So like
Right.
once you cut the poster side of things, isn't gonna basically just ruin the other
Yeah,
sides of
that
the
it will have
business?
some material impact because, like, that art didn't just exist in a vacuum, it was used across other collectibles and items. Um,
Yeah.
but, uh, so it seems like this news is devastating for people who are, like, interested in movie collectibles, and I agree that, like, Mondo posters were often beautiful. Peter, I asked you to send me a few Mondo posters, I can put them up on the screen. Are there any, like, that you wanna talk about, that you found particularly interesting?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you were asking me earlier what are some of my favorite Mondo posters of all time. I would say Ollie Moss's Star Wars trilogy is like this
Oh, that's not the right one.
triptych of Star Wars posters. And he basically boiled down the Star Wars films down to like one character each with like kind of like this what would you call that? Not a silhouette? I guess maybe silhouette. I don't know. I just to me, this might be the three best posters Mondo's ever produced.
Mhm. And for some
Um,
reason, I'm having difficulty putting them up on screen right now, but I will
oh
momentarily.
no.
This is we're doing it live without a net here, folks. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what's so amazing about doing the live experience
We
is
did
you
say
never
they were
know.
limited.
You never know if something terrible is going to go wrong, which it clearly is right now. You know, and that's what I love about going live. So here we
You,
go. I'm gonna. Yep. Go ahead.
while you try to pull that up, I just want to read this quote from Daniel Danger over at IO9. Our friend Jermaine Lucier talked
Got
with
it.
him, and he
There you
had this
go.
quote:
Boom.
"Do they not understand what they just lost? That they just lost their entire artist base? I want
Mm-hmm.
to work with Rob, Mitch, and Eric. They're Mondo. If they're not there, it's just Funko."
Mm. Okay, I have
So
put up the posters now. Right for Star Wars, there's
yeah,
uh, is it C-3PO right?
yeah.
For
See,
Empire Strikes Back, it's is that Boba Fett, and then for Return of the Jedi, it's like a silhouette of Darth Vader. You know, so for those who are just
I'm
listening to
glad
this
you
and
didn't.
not watching, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't say the Mandalorian in the middle there, Dave.
I'm pretty sure Peter would have just rage quit the broadcast immediately. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's what I really like about many of the Mondo posters are like they are minimalist, right? They are like one or two images, and then boom, it like evokes something immediately. So
yeah.
it is a huge bummer that they will no longer be running. And you know, I want to point out this is a pretty bad week for companies buying things and then shutting them down. DPReview.com, one of my favorite digital photography review websites, which was acquired by Amazon decades ago, shut down this week. And as far as we know, they are deleting the site from the internet, is what my understanding. Um, so it's a huge bummer. You know, people
That's so sad.
buy things, and then they think that they can make money off of them, and then sometimes they can't, and then they shut them down. And you know, maybe Mondo wouldn't have made it anyway, but it is a huge bummer. Peter, any other posters you want to discuss today? Any other thoughts you have on this news of Mondo laying off a bunch of their movie poster staff?
Um, I'll pull up a couple more for you. Tyler Stout. I right here I have the Goonies, but his style is like unmistakable. It's kind of like this, uh, almost like pencil drawn or inked kind of. It does all the characters, a lot of floating heads. He's had so many great Mondo posters over the years. I just picked Goonies because I didn't want to do all Star Wars stuff. And the other one I wanted to point out is Guardians of the Galaxy by Matt Taylor. Matt Taylor always has like these very vibrant, just explosive looking colors, and just always makes everything look cool. And
I was interested you chose this Halloween. You did this Halloween poster, and I was kind of curious, like, why Halloween resonated with you.
Halloween's not one of my biggest movies of all time, and these are two posters here. So the
Yeah.
one on the left of Michael Myers came first, and then the second one came like years later. But this one of Michael Myers is considered one of the best Mondo posters of all time, and that's one of the great things about Mondo is you could kind of turn one of the biggest moments of a film into like the poster itself. And I
Mhm.
don't know.
Mhm.
This is one of the scariest moments of that film where he's coming at
Yeah.
her in the closet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
Jason Edmondson. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
But I immediately thought of you, Peter, when I heard this news because you are one of the, if not the biggest Mondo collector I know, and it
uh,
is it is a bummer because I feel like they really brought a special artistry to a lot of their work. That is missing
yeah,
from a lot of movie posters. Like I'm looking at Chris Rudd's background, right? And there's some good stuff in there, but like, there's just Mondo stuff is on another level, in my opinion.
yeah.
So
And the other thing about it is that you have all these great artists that are probably not going to get as much work. Hopefully, I don't know. I hope these guys that are leaving Mondo maybe create their own company. I don't know that that's what's going to happen, but I feel like there's other companies out there. There's Bottleneck Gallery. There's Hero Complex Gallery. There's a bunch of them, but none of them have the bevy of licenses that Mondo had. And
mhm.
the great thing about Mondo too, that I think Dave would appreciate, is they didn't just go for the big Star Wars or big 80 movies and stuff like that. They also would do, smaller indie films like Parasite, which I guess became huge, but they did it before it became huge. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Small movies that
yeah,
no one's heard of, like the Best Picture award-winning movie Parasite.
you know what I'm talking about, Dave. They did not just
Yes,
go
like
for the
they're
the
not
stuff.
like billion. It's not a $1 billion grossing movie.
Yeah, yeah,
I understand. I understand.
yeah,
All right. Well, Peter, thanks for sharing some thoughts. It is a huge bummer. They are saying they'll still make more posters, right? It's not like they've said they're completely getting out of the business, but after laying off a bunch of their employees, including Mondo co-founders Mitch Putnam and Rob Jones, as well as senior creative director Eric Garza, it does feel like it's the end of an era for
yeah.
Mondo.
Can,
And
can I say one
yeah,
other thing?
yeah, please,
There
please.
are all those other companies that I mentioned. Acme Archives existed before Mondo. I ever found Mondo, but their art back then was not so great. And I think the testament is finding good artists, which Mondo was able to do, but also art direction. They had like people that art directed these prints and stuff like that. They and I feel like they've gotten rid of a lot of those people, and I'm wondering, what's going to happen.
Indeed, we will see. All right, Peter, tell people where they can find more of your work.
You can find me at slashfilm.com and Ordinary Adventures on YouTube.
Thanks, Peter, for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having
Uh,
me.
we'll be in touch. Goodbye. All right, Chris Rudd. That is our thoughts on Mondo potentially making some moves out of the poster business. But let's talk about a couple of other things that happened this week. First of all, Chris, of some interest to both you and me is the app TikTok. In recent days, lawmakers and Joe Biden have made gestures towards potentially banning TikTok in the United States. This would be a major and unprecedented move for the United States to just nuke a social media app, social video app, just like that. But many people are raising security issues, Chinese ownership issues, and so on. So TikTok sent its CEO to Capitol Hill this week to testify and try to assuage lawmakers' concerns that this is going to be okay. And I think it was a 4.5 hour long testimony that occurred this week on Capitol Hill. And Shu Zi Chu is the name of the CEO. And he testified in front of Congress. It was a pretty brutal watch. And I would say it went mixed at best. Let's talk a little bit about just like how much of the stuff did you watch? How much of the testimony did you watch? I watched like a couple hours of it myself. Did you watch any extended part of it? Did you just watch clips? Like, what was your experience of the testimony, Chris?
I watched about an hour of it live, and then I got disgusted and turned it off for a while. And then I think you were actually broadcasting it, and I caught it ironically on TikTok,
Yeah.
another large chunk.
I think you said you were disgusted. I think the experience of watching the hearings was extremely frustrating because it was extremely clear that there was no actual interest in getting answers from the CEO, Shuzi Chu. This was the House Energy and Commerce Committee hearing that happened on Thursday. And oftentimes, people, like a lawmaker, would say some ridiculous thing and they would ask a question and they're like, yes or no, it's a yes or no question. You know, can you guarantee that no one's ever been mildly upset that they watched a TikTok video, you know? And of course, the CEO was like unable to, he's like, hey, it's kind of a complicated answer. Um, and they wouldn't even let him answer the question. They would just move on to the next thing. It was clearly about grandstanding, clearly about the cameras. It was a very frustrating experience because very little new information was learned. What was your experience? What were your thoughts on how it went down?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, obviously, I guess you could call it bias, but I have a vested interest in the future of TikTok. I mean, the bulk of my audience has been garnered via TikTok, and all of my um, colleagues are on there. But also, like most of the financial opportunities that have come from my interest in TV and film are a result. 90% of which are a result of TikTok, and I hope for that to continue. Number one, so that's the selfish reasons, but also I think it's an important issue. I think the U.S. Bastion of free speech that it claims to be, making a move like this is a dangerous precedent in many ways. And it's a nuanced issue, and we lose a lot of nuance on the internet. There's a lot of things at play here, but just watching that, it became. I don't watch a ton. I don't know if you do. You seem to me to be what I know of you to be a more like globally minded person, right?
Yes,
A
I
politically
seem to
minded
be someone
person.
who spends more time watching CNBC than you do. It seems like.
The way you said it made it seem insulting. I did not mean it that way.
Uh-huh,
Uh,
fair
but
enough.
but I haven't seen a ton of those, and I imagine it is often like that. There's always some kind of grandstanding, but it was really frustrating to watch because, like you said, they were not interested in actual answers or solving this quote unquote issue at all. It was all about, to me, it seemed like they wanted to state their questions so that they could have these audio clips and sound bites for their next run for office as somebody who stood up to big tech. It's all they were interested in. And now you could read that in multiple ways. Like they've already made their decision to ban the app, or what I'm leaning towards, they already know that they're never going to do that.
Yeah.
And this is all
And
a distraction.
this is how far it's going to go, right? Like
Yes.
the grandstanding, the insults, they are what replaces meaningful legislative action in the United States, right? That's the other possibility.
Yes. And I'm not typically I don't know if I'm not usually a tinfoil hat person. But in this instance, I think you could easily surmise that there's something else that they don't want making headlines or dominating the airwaves on TikTok at this moment, or it is an attempt to squeeze some money out of a business that they currently make none from. One of the politicians that got a chance to speak actually said his question was, "What do I tell my constituents about how much money you're making and how I get none of it?" Something like, and it was so
Mm-hmm.
like, what? Because
Mm-hmm.
we had just been at safety of children, and he's like, "I got a question. Where's my money?"
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, well, I don't think you're speculating about it is wildly off base because, in general, what has happened is Congress has dragged CEOs in front of them to testify about privacy and data and so on. And then they drill these people, your Mark Zuckerbergs, your Jeff Bezoses, your Jack Dorseys, and so on. And then literally nothing meaningful happens. Like that's what has been the template for many years. Is they'll ask them a bunch of questions. Um, and then very little meaningful legislation will be passed as a result. The difference in yesterday's or this week's hearings were, first of all, there was like bipartisan anger directed towards the CEO of TikTok, which is rare. Usually it's like one party or the other that's like really upset about it. Um, and I think like the tone of the hearing was also quite different than with like Mark Zuckerberg there. It was very angry and heated and intense, and dare I say, mildly xenophobic.
I was
So
going to say that if you
yeah,
didn't. So
yeah, yeah, and that might lead you to think that hey, maybe some action will actually take place that results in the ban of TikTok. I think it's certainly possible. We are months away from that happening if it does happen, and there's a lot that can happen in the next few months. Um, you know, Biden has said if this bill hits his desk that would allow him to ban TikTok, he would sign it. But he also has said that if they divest themselves, that it could be okay, and so a divestiture might happen, or maybe the bill will change meaningfully in such a way that Biden can't unilaterally ban the, like all kinds of stuff could happen between now and then. Couple of other things to mention before we get to our conversation about John Wick, which is number one, I do want to say I don't think the CEO did great on the stand. He did his job, which was to be on the stand and remain calm as people barked all these ridiculous accusations at him, not directly laugh in their faces, which I would have done if I was in that situation. Like he maintained his composure and like overall did a decent job. As I told you before we started broadcasting, I thought he would get like a B or a B minus from me, but it needed to be an A, and it wasn't an A. Like he did very little to assuage people's concerns. There were certain questions a bunch of questions he couldn't even answer. Um, he seemed to many people to be kind of like an underling who's not really in charge. And I saw some people speculating maybe this is why he hasn't been rolled out until he has not had a super high profile. Uh, he's not had a really high profile until recently, right? So it's like maybe the reason why is because he's not a big enough deal in the company. There's too many things he can't speak to. So I wanted to acknowledge that like he did fine, but I don't think he did great. It could have been worse, but it wasn't awesome, and it should have been awesome. He should have been like, here are the definitive things, and partially he didn't get the chance to do that, but partially, I think he couldn't speak to a lot of the stuff that people were concerned about. But before we move off this topic, Chris, I just want to spend a minute acknowledging why you think TikTok is important and why it's a meaningful part of your life.
sure. Well, to me personally, like I said, I mean, this is the farthest I've been podcasting, blogging, even making short films, all whatever you can think of. I've done multiple versions of it for about a decade now. And just in the past year and a half, I've gotten light years farther in the cause to me achieving certain goals that I have personally and professionally than in the 9 years previously, just because of TikTok. The magic algorithm that they talk about all the time is so effective at reaching a new audience for smaller creators. And I've found a community and a voice that I can push towards my podcast and any other projects that I want to do. And I was hoping to have another few years to crack at this on a selfish standpoint, but also I do make a small side income that has made me a lot more comfortable in very trying times. And I think that's true for a lot of creators on the app. So there's a mental health basis for it, a sense of community, but also a lot of people are making money that they need to live. And small businesses, there are thousands, if not millions, of smaller
I
businesses
think
that are
it's
able to
at
get traction.
I think it's at something like 5 million businesses, if I'm not mistaken, or
That's the number I heard.
yeah,
And do you know who Keith?
some large number of businesses are like have a TikTok presence, basically. So yeah, go ahead.
Do you know who Keith Lee is? The food reviewer.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so he's gone mega viral, right? But his
Yeah.
whole shtick is that he tries to find small, failing restaurants,
Yeah.
and he's able, with one video, to not only revitalize their business but blow it through the roof, right? These are the kinds of things that you didn't see happen on Facebook, right? Like nobody's like, oh,
Yeah.
thank God, somebody Snapchatted a story about my restaurant. Now it's saved, right? That's just not the kind of power that any of these other apps have had. I think it's an important thing.
By choice. I mean, they are designed. the way TikTok is designed is you can make a video sitting on your couch in about 30 seconds and it can reach 5 million people. I know because I've done that many times, right? And like none of the other apps are structured in such a way as to make video creation so easy and to make virality so quick as well as easy. Instagram Reels doesn't do it. YouTube Shorts doesn't do it. Uh, TikTok is really special in that it can get you in front of a lot of people really quickly. And for many people, it's been a source of community, bonding, um, but also money. And there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of people that are going to be impacted if it is banned. Uh, it's a weird time we're living in where Congress is trying to get rid of this thing. So, okay. Uh, Flammungus in the chat says, I sympathize with content creators and whatnot, but in my opinion, for the betterment of society, all social media, Facebook and Twitter, should be nuked and removed from existence. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree, but if we're going to have some, we might as well have the good stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that would be the only defensible position if you were going to remove something like TikTok. You would have to you'd have to wipe it all off.
Yeah.
That's just to say one last pen in it. Like if there was some kind of demonstrable national security concern, I would totally understand taking extreme action. But I think it's important that people know that there isn't one. There is no demonstrable evidence that has been provided that TikTok in itself is any more dangerous than any of the American social media companies that frequently sell data of American citizens to other countries. And there is no known difference between those two. And there are hundreds of apps made in China that are readily available. And all of the electronic devices that we
Right.
download these apps onto are made.
Right, like DJI is a Chinese company. They make your drone, and they make the app that goes on your phone to control your drone. Is like, are we going to have no drones anymore? And you could do this for like dozens and dozens of apps. I will say that TikTok has not exactly covered itself in glory. Like they have done some sketchy stuff. Um, Not even talking about like how badly they have treated creators in the past. I mean, like they used location data to try to identify journalists. That's like pretty bad and kind of confirms a lot of people's fears about TikTok. And they claimed it was a rogue team that did it, but that's still not great, right?
Yeah, they were just like,
So
that is wild. We fixed that issue. It's like, well,
yeah, they're like, okay, like after that one, there's no more problem. Like, yes, that happened once where we used private data to try to track people down that were leaking bad info about us. But trust me, from this point forward, it's not going to happen. NA
we
says
here for you.
if TikTok, yeah, we here for you. If TikTok were banned, why wouldn't there be a replacement? I think here's the thing. I think people just underestimate how hard it is to replace things. Because let me tell you, 95% of the people I know on Twitter would have loved to not be on Twitter. Would love to not be on Twitter right now. They would love to be somewhere else. They would love to have some other app that replaced Twitter because there is a far right activist and narcissist running the app right now. But most of the people I know are still on there because it's hard to change people's habits. It's hard to architect an app that is as robust as Twitter used to be, at least. It's just hard. It's difficult. You can't just like, oh, hey, we launched a thing that's TikTok exactly with all the same features, but with none of the Chinese connections. That's just not. It's not easy to do. You can't just snap your fingers and have that happen. It takes years of work to accomplish something like that. So, anyway, okay. Either way, really upsetting to see these hearings. I don't think they went well for. I don't think anyone looked good at coming out of it. I don't think the CEO of TikTok looked good coming out of it. I don't think the lawmakers looked good coming out of it. It was an embarrassing spectacle, and very unfortunate that our tax dollars were expended on it. Okay. Well, Chris, wrapping up here, let's talk about John Wick Chapter 4. What do you think about the John Wick series leading up to the fourth entry?
I've always been a huge fan of the John Wick series, the franchise. I think it's one of the best franchises that we've ever had, especially if like you want to talk about recent action franchises. If you really try to meditate on the last any other time you can think of like four really truly all-time great movies in one franchise, right? You might say Toy Story, and I wouldn't chastise that. You might even say Mission Impossible. Uh, and you could even get crazy. You could get crazy, and I wouldn't judge you if you said Fast and Furious 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, and 7. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
you could say that, but it's rare, like to have like banger after banger, if you will. Like even like Terminator 1 and 2, and then
Yeah.
Aliens had a bunch of misses. It's difficult, and I think John Wick has done that like consistently. And I remember seeing that movie in theaters on opening night in 2014, I think it was the first John Wick. My expectations were very low. Keanu had been on kind of a rough run. Apart from, I'm a huge fan of Constantine. But after The Matrix, there was pretty much a lot of some weird choices and nothing. And so going into John Wick at the time, I was like, oh, this might be a fun little B movie action flick. And then leaving, I was like, holy, I don't know if I can cuss, but I was like, wow, that's like it's another like Matrix level realignment of choreography and action filmmaking that we've just witnessed, right? And then we saw a whole slew of gun fu and people trying to copy John Wick the way that they copied The Matrix. Something really neat about John Wick is how it's absurd, right? But it's also really realistic. He gets tired. He frequently loses fights for a while. He has to reload his guns, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, he shows weariness.
I think if you total the number of stories that John Wick has fallen in the franchise, it's probably like 10. Like there's so many times where he like will fall from a great height and just boom, like splat flat on the ground, and he'll just get up and everything's fine. So I'm kind of like a little bit. You're right. He does have
I
to
think the first
reload.
time that happened was
He
the
does
was the
occasionally
third one.
reload. No, first, I literally just watched the first film. He's at the nightclub, and somebody pushes him off the edge of the second
That's
floor of the
one
nightclub.
story.
Okay, you're right. That's one story. One and a half. One and a half, because it's a little bit high, But I say that because also, yes, the third film, the fourth film, he does take some pretty big falls. Let's just say he takes some pretty big tumbles in these movies. So I agree. It's I reject the notion that John Wick is realistic, but I think it is more grounded than many action films. I will give you that. So
Yeah, and that's there's like a dichotomy there. I really want to. I'm dying on this hill because, of course, it's absurd in many ways. It's over the top. That's its whole shtick. But if you look at something like RRR, or Shoot 'em Up, or any other thing that you can think of where you might have like a reload where they just sling their revolver across their thigh and all the bullets magically kind of insert into their gun, or and that's kind of fun stuff, right? Like there is none of that in John Wick. Like Keanu trains for weeks and months on end to learn how to operate all of these real weapons and how they actually are reloaded, and efficient magazine techniques and all that stuff, right? Like, so there's that element in this over the top setting, and that's what I think that mixture is what makes it so special.
hmm Well, I have really liked the John Wick movies overall. But I mean, John Wick 1 is like a perfect B movie action movie where like I've recently rewatched John Wick 1, and it is it is so much more grounded than all the other movies. Like it's just kind of like a very small story, right? Like guy kills this person's dog, and then he goes and destroys their entire crime syndicate. Like that's the it's that old chestnut, and uh, the sort of the like level of action feels like much more believable than in subsequent films. But there's like a good 30 minutes where you don't even know that John Wick is a badass. Like he's just kind of a normal guy. Um, he gets the crap beat out of him when his home is robbed. And so you're like, why is this guy like a big deal? Why is it called John Wick or whatever? And then of course the action goes from 0 to like 15 in the course of like 10 minutes, and then it stays at that level for the rest of the movie. The other movies I have found to be progressively more and more silly. Like it felt like the first movie introduced these really interesting ideas of like the Continental Hotel and like it's consecrated and you can desecrate it and no business shall be conducted on hotel grounds and all these kinds of things. And it kind of gives you these glimpses of a bigger world. And in the second and third films, we explored that bigger world, and I don't think there was that much there, or if there was, it didn't really make much sense to me. It just feels really silly. Like, oh, so there's homeless people are also like part of the world of assassins. Like, literally, everyone is an assassin in New York City, right? There's more assassins than non-assassins in New York City. Um, and it just is like progressively more and more silly, but that's fine. Like I don't mind that. At the same time, the movie is very earnest and it takes itself extremely seriously, right? So I have found the plot of the first film to be like really silly, but like purposefully, like very self-consciously, like, hey, this is kind of over the top. And then like the second and third films have like progressively upped the ante to be more and more over the top. Uh, in a way that you may or may not enjoy, but like I guess I have found to remove the emotional stakes for me. You know what I mean? Like uh it's hard for me to like emotionally connect to the world of John Wick because it is so ridiculous. In the first one I could, but as the world has gotten progressively more ridiculous and as he's murdered literally thousands of people at this point, it's kind of like hard for me to like perceive this as a normal human being who has like regular thoughts and emotions and so on. So when I went into John Wick Chapter 4, all I was hoping for would that it would be like, hey, it has some good action scenes, kind of like John Wick Chapter 3, and that would be a success for me, right? Um, but yeah, what did you think of John Wick Chapter 4 compared to the other films?
So I had very high expectations. I rewatched the first three leading up to seeing the premiere of four, and a lot of my friends online, other critics and reviewers had said this is by far the best John Wick in the franchise. And I was like, really? Because that's tough. The first one is still my favorite, even after seeing four, I think. I mean, it's really hard to replicate the novelty and simplicity of the first movie. Like you said, that's one of my favorite sub genres is when somebody's a really badass dude and you don't know, and you get to slowly find that out and it's revealed to you.
Uh-huh.
Like after that first major,
how many movies are in that genre, Chris?
like 9. It is my favorite thing.
What is there another movie that comes to mind that is in that genre?
No, it's just a thing. I love when it happens. I'll get back to you when I remember something else.
Yeah.
But it's mostly in like, it happens a lot in fantasy fiction, like books, which is like another one of my like roots of nerddoms. But that first fight in the first movie, there's a cool moment where he takes everybody out and then he answers the door and it's a police officer. And you're like, oh no, what's he going to do now? Like there's bodies everywhere. And the cop just goes, John, you working again? And he gets real scared and leaves. And then you start to get this idea of how powerful this dude is and how nobody wants to mess with him, right?
I like how there's a scene where there's this guy guarding the club that his target is in, and John like puts a gun up to his head and is like, "Hey, have you lost some weight, Francis?" And he's like, Francis is like, yeah, I've lost a few pounds or whatever. And then he's like, "Why don't you take the night off?" And then Francis turns around and he's like, "Thank you, sir." Like, because he's like, "Thank you for you could have easily killed me. You spared my life." Like everyone knows how dangerous this guy is, right?
Yes, yes, and I think you see it a lot in what I'm talking. That feeling that I'm talking about, it's kind of amorphous, but you see it a lot in anime, like maybe older samurai films. You see it a lot in older westerns.
Yeah, people in the chat are chiming in with some of the examples. So the Man from Nowhere, Pizza Rat says the Man from Nowhere. Marcus Stewart
there you
says
go.
Marcus Stewart says Taken. That's a great example. Let me throw out a couple of examples. History of Violence, I think, is probably like one of the canonical examples of this, right?
Love that movie. Long Kiss Goodnight.
Long Kiss Goodnight, great one. The Foreigner, the new Jackie Chan movie, that's a pretty good one.
Born Identity.
Born Identity, depending on how you feel. Die Hard, you could say he's a secret badass, or you could say he's just a normal, regular, grizzled detective, whatever you want to believe, but he becomes a badass, certainly.
He handles himself, that's true.
Yeah. So those are some great examples of guy who becomes reveals himself to be a badass out of nowhere, or herself in the case of Long Kiss Goodnight. Liam says Morbius, great example. There's a guy who you're like, this guy's a doofus, and obviously, he still is by the end of the movie. Okay, So
But yes,
you had
so
high expectations going into
I
John Wick
and I
Chapter 4.
and I don't know if it's controversial or not, but I actually do love the second and third films. Like the first John Wick to me is a 5-star film, and the other two are 4.5. Like that's just how I roll. I'm really generous with stars anyway, though. But uh, I do think it's fat. I don't know if you've watched them recently, but I was watching the second movie and I was like, wow, Ruby Rose casting. That was really an of the moment choice.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then the third one, I probably wouldn't have gone with Halle Berry, maybe. So they're not perfect, but they are fun. They do what sequels are
What do you
supposed
mean
to
you wouldn't have
do.
gone with Halle Berry? I thought she was awesome in the third film.
I love Halle Berry. I just don't know that. I don't know. It just didn't work for me
Mm.
100%
Okay,
in that
fair enough.
role. Um,
Remember
but I
when Ruby
think
Rose used to be like in literally every single thing that you went
for
to
like a
get
year and a
beer?
half, two
For like,
years,
yeah, a
yeah,
few years, Ruby Rose was in everything. Anyway.
that's what I was watching that like, oh yeah. But I think that they do exactly what a sequel. It's a perfect sequel completion. Like you're expanding the universe, but you're not losing sight of what made the first movie so special. And they continue to do that with each successive sequel. They're very good at that. Um, but yes, so I had very high expectations, and it nailed it. I think the fourth movie is the best movie since the first one. They've tried really hard to add some emotional stakes, like you were talking about, Dave. I don't know if that worked for you or not, but I could see that they tried harder to do
Hmm.
that. I think for me, the emotional stakes in John Wick is the character itself, how much you love the character. I can think of watching Logan for the first time and having that so profoundly affect me simply by nature of me having watched Hugh Jackman play this character for 15 years, right? And I kind of get that, like the love of Keanu Reeves bleeds into the John Wick franchise for me and makes me actually love this character more. So there's some weird meta elements to that. And they did the same thing with other beloved characters, like you've got Hiroyuki Sanada, you've got Scott Adkins, Donnie Yen,
I
and
mean,
you're just
that's
like, oh man,
what the John Wick franchise has always been awesome about doing is taking these amazing action performers, stunt performers, often of East Asian descent, and kind of giving them major. Wasn't Mark Dacascos in the movies, right? That guy from The Raid was in John. Like they've taken all these people who are like legends and put them into this universe in a way that really does them great honor, in my opinion. Like kind of is extremely respectful. And the best example of this so far is Donnie Yen in John Wick Chapter 4, who is uh, the best. I'll say I'm not going to call him a villain, but I'll say he's a John Wick antagonist in John Wick Chapter 4, and he is by far the best antagonist of the whole franchise, in my opinion. He's a complete badass in this movie, physically formidable, and has a great and interesting backstory. Uh, I think Donnie Yen is incredible. Like he's awesome, and I hope that like this movie, he was in Rogue One, which is a big deal, but I hope this movie continues to elevate his stature because I think he's incredible. So uh, that's one big thing I think this movie has going for it. And the other thing that I love about John Wick Chapter 4 is uh, the filmmakers are what I would say are generous filmmakers. And what I mean by that is they do not want to show you an action scene unless it is something that has not been done before in the John Wick franchise, right? Like, unless it is something that it's like, we can put a unique spin on this. It's not just going to be another nightclub shootout. It's going to have water falling from the ceiling, or it's going to have cars driving through it, or it's going to have this other thing, like they always want to put a unique spin on the action in such a way that you are rewarded for not only watching this movie but also having watched all the other movies. You're never bored. You're never like, oh, there's a scene like this in the first one, I don't need to watch this. Every single action scene is inventive, and in particular, the final hour of John Wick Chapter 4 has some of the best action I've ever seen in my entire life. Right? What do you think, Chris?
I agree with you 100%. I think that last hour, there were some things that I didn't think were
Yeah,
possible
like
for
it's
what
just
they're
like
doing.
it's never been attempted before. Some of the things that they did.
Yes, and so in that way, it's kind of like Fury Road or something. It's
Yeah,
like you're watching this, like I don't even know how they did this, right? And
yeah.
it's always been, I think, this franchise is a masterpiece in genre filmmaking. So if you're watching this, it's not really your thing. Um, that's fine. That's always fine. But I really don't think that you would love classic kung fu movies or that you would love westerns, or that you would love like balls to the wall action movies of any kind. If you don't love this, these are movies made by choreographers and stuntmen that honor that craft to the nth degree, and pay homage to all these movies that we love. Like, they reference The Warriors, they reference Once Upon a Time in the West, either overtly or in a hidden way that makes it fun. There's even a few references to like the main actor's own careers. Like, I think it's the second movie where Lawrence Fishburne, and obviously you're as a viewer, you're like, that's Morpheus and Neo. They're
Yeah.
back on screen.
Yeah.
And so he looks at him and he says, "What do you need?" And he goes, "Guns, lots of guns," which is, of course, one of the most famous lines from The Matrix, right? So you either in that moment go yes, or you check out, like, come on. And it's going to go one or two ways, and that's every John Wick movie is that way, I think. You're either going to love it or it's not for you.
Shareable Texas in the chat says, I felt so cared for in the audience as opposed to Shazam and Ant-Man, where nobody's in the same room or a real place. And after weeks and weeks of seeing movies where people are in a CG fictional place that doesn't look real at all, and you're not convinced that they're actually interacting with anything, to watch a movie like John Wick Chapter 4, where, yes, they use digital enhancement, yes, they use green screen and stuff like that, but it really feels like real people went and did a lot of these things. It's really refreshing. So, all right, Chris, any closing thoughts on John Wick Chapter 4, or shall we wrap it up there?
I love it so much. It's visceral. It's visual filmmaking. I love all the people involved. I can't wait for the next one. There's a spinoff coming out. I don't know if it's this year or soon, but it's called Ballerina. If you're not aware, you should look into that. But I think we should get more. I want to see, go crazy with it, right? Put John Wick in hell, make him fight his way out, kill all the demons. I'm here for it. Get silly. It's awesome. People seem to love it. I know I do. I don't know about you, Dave, but my theatrical experience, and you might get annoyed by this kind of stuff, I'm not sure, but people were cheering and clapping when Keanu came on screen, right? Like, there's this like communal love for John Wick that I haven't seen since like toward the end of the Infinity Saga in the MCU. Like, I was kind of looking around like, you guys love him as much as I do? Are we clapping? Yeah, it was just a fun time, and I hope everybody gets to experience that in a theater.
That's wonderful. Well, Chris Rudd is the host of the Streaming Things podcast. He also runs the Movies Are Therapy TikTok channel, where he talks about movies every day. Chris, thanks for chatting with me here today on the Dave Chen YouTube channel, Twitch channel, and also my personal Patreon page. Really appreciate it.
Dave, thank you so much. Everybody have a good night.